Over the coming days, the team planned to build up a picture of the site below ground, using ground-penetrating radar.
Ground-penetrating radar just picked up something underneath a boat-shaped formation in Turkey that shouldn't be there. Tightly spaced, parallel lines running the entire length of the structure, evenly spaced like ribs, not scattered, not random, clustered in a pattern that traces almost exactly the outline of the shape sitting above it.
3D mapping of the site above ground has already helped highlight one very significant fact. Intriguingly, the boat shape very closely matches the dimensions of Noah's Ark.
I've spent the last few days going through the new survey data on the Durupinar formation, and I need to walk you through it, because depending on who you ask, this is either the strongest piece of evidence this site has ever produced, or the most convincing illusion geology has ever built. By the end of this video, you'll have seen both sides, and I don't think you'll be able to unsee either one. The shape that won't stay buried. Here's where we are. Near the border of Iran and Turkey sits the Durupinar Formation, a massive boat-shaped scar in the landscape, first spotted from the air in 1959 by a Turkish army captain named İlhan Durupinar. He wasn't looking for the Ark. He was flying an aerial survey mission, and then this shape passed underneath him, roughly 515 feet long, 85 feet wide, 49 feet high. Dimensions that line up with startling precision against the measurements given for Noah's Ark in the Book of Genesis. A joint research effort called the Mount Ararat and Noah's Ark Research Team, made up of scholars from Turkish and American universities, has been quietly studying this site for years. The ground is mostly limonite, an iron-rich rock, and local tradition has insisted for generations that this could be the fossilized, mineral-replaced remains of the Ark itself. Material pulled from the surrounding soil has been dated to somewhere between 5,500 and 3,000 BC. And mixed into that soil, researchers have found clay-like sediment, marine deposits, and fragments believed to be ancient seafood remains. Picture that for a second. Shellfish residue, buried in a landlocked mountain valley, hundreds of miles from any coastline. This isn't the first expedition to chase this story. For centuries, people have set their sights on nearby Mount Ararat, the peak the Bible names as the Ark's final resting place. Explorers have come back with claims of hand-cut timber high on its slopes, aerial photographs of dark silhouettes locked in ice, and first-hand reports of anomalies too geometric to be natural. In the 1800s and 1900s, an explorer named James Bryce reported finding worked wood near the summit. Wood that, he argued, could only have been carried there by human hands. But here's the problem that's dogged this search for 200 years. The ancient sources don't even agree with each other. Some early writers claimed fragments of the Ark still existed in their own lifetimes. Others, like the medieval traveler Fitakia of Regensburg, wrote that it had already crumbled to nothing centuries before he arrived. Mainstream archaeology has always treated the Ararat legend the same way: intriguing, persistent, and short on anything that would hold up under a microscope. That's the gap the new scan data is trying to close. And it's why I couldn't just skim past this story. I had to sit with it. What the new scans actually found? Let me take you inside the data itself, because this is where things get genuinely strange. Using ground-penetrating radar and electrical resistivity tomography, international researchers mapped the subsurface beneath Durupinar without disturbing a single inch of the ground above it. What came back wasn't noise, it was structure. Long, parallel bands run beneath the formation at surprisingly regular intervals. The kind of spacing you'd expect from internal decks or bulkheads, not from randomly deposited rock. Picture standing at the edge of that valley with the survey team, watching the resistivity readout paint itself across a laptop screen in real time. A shape sharpening line by line, matching the visible boat-like outline etched into the hillside above it. That's the moment researchers on site have described feeling the hair on the back of their neck go up. Not proof, but a moment. Skeptical geologists aren't backing down though, and it's worth hearing them out. Because their argument is a strong one. Limonite formations are known to develop natural banding and layering, especially in regions that have experienced repeated flooding, tectonic shifting, and mineral deposition across thousands of years. Our brains are exceptionally good at finding order in chaos, a phenomenon called pareidolia, and a boat-shaped hillside is exactly the kind of thing that primes us to see a boat-shaped structure underneath it, whether or not one is actually there. What makes this particular round of scanning different from previous surveys isn't just that anomalies were found, it's how densely they cluster. Earlier surveys picked up scattered, inconsistent signals across a wide area. This time, the readings concentrate almost entirely within the footprint of the formation itself, rather than spreading out into the surrounding hillside, the way you'd expect from ordinary geological banding. The research team has been careful, almost stubbornly careful, not to oversell this. Their official language describes the findings as warranting further excavation, nothing more. But privately, more than one member of the team has called this the most compelling dataset the site has produced in over a decade. Enough apparently to greenlight a new physical dig in the coming season, which means the real test of this mystery, shovels in the ground, samples in a lab, is still ahead of us. And that's exactly the kind of update I want to bring you the moment it happens. If digging into stories like this, the one sitting right on the edge between hard evidence and old legend, is your kind of rabbit hole, this channel is going to keep pulling that thread. Subscribing means you won't miss it when that excavation team breaks ground, because I'll be covering it here first. Now, let's follow the trail to the second mountain that's entered this story. A second mountain enters the story. Not everyone is convinced Durupinar, or even Mount Ararat, is the right place to be digging at all. A researcher named David Allen Deal has spent years building an entirely separate theory, placing the Ark's true landing site 17 miles south, on a peak he calls Mesha Mountain, or Mashu Da. Deal's case leans heavily on linguistics and one of the oldest surviving texts in human history, the Epic of Gilgamesh. He argues the Ark first came to rest at a high point roughly 7,400 feet up the mountain, and that Noah's family later built the first post-flood settlement, which Deal calls Mesha Nakshuan, using salvaged timber from the vessel itself. Over centuries, earthquakes and erosion supposedly dragged the wreckage further down the slope, scattering debris as it went. What makes this theory hard to dismiss outright is how the local geography seems to echo it. Mesha is said to translate roughly to pulled out of water. Nakshuan has been interpreted by some scholars as Noah's Zion. And the mountain itself has twin peaks forming a wall-like silhouette, a feature referenced directly in the Epic of Gilgamesh as the Wall of Heaven, described as the very place where the flood hero's vessel first made landfall. During expeditions in 1996 and 1997, Deal says he found ancient settlement remains near the summit, along with that Wall of Heaven formation his theory had predicted before he ever set foot on the mountain. He's also pointed to ancient artwork and statues depicting figures from the Genesis narrative, most notably a woman named Nama, linked in some traditions to this exact mountain. Mainstream researchers remain unconvinced, and it's fair to say Deal's theory hasn't been independently verified through controlled excavation or peer-reviewed dating. It sits as one competing possibility among several, but it means that even before we solve the mystery of what's under Durupinar, we don't actually agree on which mountain deserves our attention in the first place. What this means for faith. Long before anyone had radar equipment, the story of Noah's Ark was already contested ground, not over where it landed, but over what it means. Judaism and Christianity share this flood narrative, but the two traditions read its history and its stakes differently, and that difference shapes how each side reacts to news like this. Early Jewish and Christian writers, including the historian Flavius Josephus, treated the Ark as a literal, historical vessel, which is part of why any physical evidence, real or contested, carries such enormous weight within these communities. If the Durupinar formation turns out to be genuine, it wouldn't just validate a story. For many believers, it would validate the reliability of Scripture itself. That's a different kind of stake than the one archaeologists are working with. And it's worth understanding both, because it explains why this story generates so much passion on every side of the debate, from believers hoping for confirmation to scholars insisting the evidence has to stand on its own, independent of what anyone wants it to say. Every culture has a flood story. Here's something that complicates the picture even further. Noah's Ark isn't the only flood story out there, not even close. The Eridu Genesis, one of the oldest known flood accounts, comes from ancient Mesopotamia and is believed to have influenced both the Gilgamesh flood story and the biblical account. In China, the flood narrative centers on the goddess Nu Wa. In Egypt, it's tied to the sun, god Ra. In ancient Greece, Deucalion and Pyrrha survive inside a wooden chest that comes to rest on a mountaintop. In Hawaiian tradition, a figure named Nu'u builds a massive canoe and survives a flood that ends on Mauna Kea. The closest parallel to Noah comes from the Epic of Gilgamesh, where a flood hero named Utnapishtim is warned by the gods, builds an enormous vessel, survives a catastrophic deluge, and sends out birds afterward to search for dry land, nearly beat for beat what happens in Genesis. The differences are telling though. Noah is spared because of his righteousness. Utnapishtim survives largely through the personal favor of one sympathetic god. Same skeleton, different moral spine. An even older account, the Atrahasis epic, rediscovered in the 19th century, shares striking details with both stories, including a 7-day warning before the flood and the release of birds afterward to locate land. Taken together, this pattern suggests either a shared cultural memory of a genuinely catastrophic regional flood somewhere in the ancient Near East, or a universal human instinct to process large-scale disaster through story. Either way, it means whatever is or isn't buried under that Turkish hillside is tangled up with the oldest storytelling tradition our species has ever produced. The tablet that changed the shape of the Ark. Now, here's the twist that made me stop and re-watch my own footage twice, because it doesn't come from a mountainside at all. It comes from a clay tablet, roughly the size of your hand. After World War II, a British soldier named Leonard Simmons collected ancient artifacts while stationed in Iraq. Among them was a nearly 4,000-year-old Babylonian tablet that eventually made its way to the British Museum into the hands of curator Irving Finkel. When Finkel finally sat down and translated the cuneiform script line by line, he found a flood narrative that mirrors Noah's story, almost beat for beat. Animals boarding the vessel 2 by 2, a warning from the divine, a catastrophic flood. But then he hit a detail that stopped him cold. The boat described on the tablet isn't shaped like a ship at all. It's round, built like a coracle, the circular reed and hide riverboats used across ancient Mesopotamia. Now, picture the engineering logic here. A round hull has no bow and no stern to catch a current sideways and capsize. In violent, directionless floodwaters, that shape wouldn't just work. It might be the smarter design. This single tablet reshaped how some scholars think about the earliest versions of this story, suggesting later retellings, including the biblical account most of us grew up with, may have reimagined the vessel's shape across centuries of retelling and translation. Finkel's discovery was significant enough that it inspired attempts to build a full-scale replica of the round ark, using instructions lifted directly off the tablet, just to test whether the design could genuinely survive a large-scale flood. And yet, Finkel himself remains one of the story's most notable skeptics. He doesn't think the Ark was ever a literal, historical object. He sees it as one of humanity's oldest and most enduring narratives about survival, judgment, and starting over. Powerful precisely because it's a story, not because it needs to be a fact. Faith meets modern science. While researchers argue over radar readouts and 4,000-year-old cuneiform, this story keeps living far outside the world of academic debate. In northern Kentucky, Ken Ham's Answers in Genesis Organization built the Ark Encounter, a full-scale, 510-foot wooden replica of the Ark, built to the Bible's exact stated dimensions, sitting inside. An 800-acre theme park that draws around 1.5 million visitors a year. Walk through it, and you're moving through 3 levels of exhibits designed to make the story physical. Something you experience with your own feet, not just read on a page. That's exactly why the new scans out of Turkey matter to so many people beyond the research community. If Durupinar, or Meşa Mountain, or somewhere else entirely, genuinely holds the remains of an ancient massive wooden structure, this wouldn't just be a win for religious tradition. It would be one of the most significant archaeological discoveries in modern history, sitting at the exact intersection of faith, ancient engineering, and Earth's geological past, which is exactly why the caution from researchers matters. Every claim gets pulled from multiple directions at once. Geologists checking whether the structure is nothing more than mineral banding, archaeologists demanding verified organic material and reliable radiocarbon dates, and theologians working out what a confirmed discovery would even mean for a story that has always run as much on faith as on physical proof. What happens next? So where does that leave us? The newest scans of the Durupinar Formation have done exactly what a genuine mystery is supposed to do. They've reopened a question that never fully closed. The subsurface patterns are intriguing enough to justify a real excavation, but not yet conclusive enough to satisfy the skeptics. And I don't think they should be. The competing Mesha Mountain theory keeps a second location in play. And that Babylonian tablet reminds us that even the shape of the thing we're looking for might be up for debate. What we're left with is a site that refuses to give a simple answer. Not confirmed, not dismissed, just unresolved in the most interesting way a mystery can be. Researchers say the next step is a fresh excavation season, guided directly by exactly where these new scans detected the strongest anomalies. If that dig pulls up organic material that survives rigorous, independent dating, it could either validate decades of speculation or quietly close the book on Durupinar for good. I'll be here when that happens, walking through whatever they find, one layer at a time. So if you want to be there for the moment those shovels actually hit the ground, that's exactly what subscribing gets you. Until then, the formation sits right where it sat for thousands of years, still shaped like a boat, still surrounded by soil that shouldn't hold marine sediment this far from any sea. So, I'll leave you with the same question the researchers are sitting with tonight. If the ground beneath that Turkish hillside really is hiding something built by human hands, what else has the Earth been quietly holding on to, waiting for someone to finally look?